Okay, good morning everybody. Alex Hazeldine here, Fusion Account Manager. I've also got my colleague with us, Chris Hord, our Partner Consultant. Welcome to the first in a series of Fusion webinars on moving your customers to Office 365. So thank you for joining us today. Now, this first webinar in the series is all going to be about moving your customers to Office 365, what's involved and what's in it for you and your customer. Now, we will have a Q&A session at the end of this webinar, and we are recording it as well. So if you do require a copy of the webinar or a copy of the slide deck, we will be providing those as well. And with that, I hand you over to our partner consultant, Chris Hord.
Thank you, Alex. So to introduce myself, my name is Chris Hord, and Alex has said, partner consultant. I've worked with the organisation for about 10 years, and my background is in service transition. So I started out provisioning and funny enough, doing migrations. And over the course of that 10 years, I've migrated over 100,000 users to both Exchange platforms and Office 365. I was involved in introducing Office 365 into the business many moons ago now. And some of the clients that I've worked with over that period are on the right-hand side. So Southampton Football Club, Reading, Mothercare, Lawn Tennis Association, and many more besides. So the migrations that I've worked on have been large, they've been small, complex, simple. And when we are doing migrations, it really is about fitting what's best for the customer. And that means that there are many different types of migrations, and we'll go over them today. So when putting together the content, we wanted to have quite clear learning outputs. The first of those is to understand why moving to Office 365 is an opportunity for you. I think it's very important that if we're moving to Office 365, that we understand the reasons for doing it, the reasons for why it's valuable for the customer. And the second reason, to understand what we need to consider when migrating customers. There's a lot of confusion around as to how we migrate, what type of migration we do. Do we use migration tools? All this will be covered in the session today. The third is to understand what those migration types, tools and management options that are available to us. Different clients require different ways to migrate, and as the professional in this, we have to make our choice as to how to guide them onto Office 365, and we do that by looking at what's available to us. And the fourth is to understand additional professional and managed services opportunities we have. So migrations and service transition is a great time for upselling, for meeting additional requirements that the clients have had for some time. And so we can stack these things on top of the migration to make things more profitable, but also to meet the needs of the customer and to have a better relationship with them. So we'll start with the first, which was the reasons to move to Office 365, and it is all about the opportunity that Office 365 is for yourselves. And I think that the most important thing to highlight straight off the bat is that at this moment in time, there's 135 million commercial users on Office 365. Now that's gone up from 120 million at the end of last year, so it is accelerating. Office 365 started in 2011 at the time. That it was the new platform that Microsoft developed off the back of its Business Productivity Suite, or BPOS, and since that time it has been gaining a massive amount of ground, and it's quite possibly the largest business productivity suite at this point in the world. Now, when discussing Office 365 with our partners, we hear a lot of good things about it. So as well as the fact that it's rapidly growing, we wanted to also provide you with feedback from our partners. We performed the Modern Workplace survey earlier this year, and there's some interesting results out of the back of that, as you can see in the table on the right hand side. From the Modern Workplace survey, our partners believe that Office 365 has made them more relevant to the customer, because we're no longer just interacting with them because of email. You have the collaboration content through applications like SharePoint, OneDrive, Microsoft Teams. You have the physical copies of Office. You have the automation through Power Apps and Flow. There is a lot more things to talk about and to interact with the customer. So 78% that said that it's made them more relevant, I think is quite meaningful there. The second aspect of it, Exchange, our partners report that Exchange Online has made the customer's experience with email better, and I think a lot of that boils down to the fact that you can control more in Office 365. You have access to PowerShell, you have access to the Exchange admin console. On hosted Exchange, you can do quite a lot of things such as aliases and distribution lists and permissions. But if you want to make an ad hoc change on the actual platform itself, then you have to raise a service request. You have to wait some time in order for that to be done and then reviewed. So being able to go in and make those ad hoc changes, you've got a higher level of control. So that means that you can react easier to your customer's request. And the third thing is that partners say that Office 365 has improved the relationship with the customer. I think that looking at the statistic on the left-hand side about the fact that there's 135 million commercial users, I think that it's fair to say that a lot of customers, even if they've not got Office 365, have heard of it. They may have looked into it and find it an intriguing proposition. So being able to deliver that and move them to it has overall made their customers happier with them, that they're responding to their modern workplace needs. But beyond the explosive growth of Office 365, beyond the fact that our partners are saying that at this point it's the way to go, there are a lot more reasons as to why. For example, Microsoft have additional products that can be stacked on top of Office 365. So when we're considering things like Microsoft Project or Microsoft Visio, we're thinking things like the Azure Cloud Compute Platform. These can all be added on top of Office 365 and work in the same ecosystem. So it gives them amazing possibilities. The opportunity for partners is that by engaging with Office 365 now, they're going to be ahead of the market trends. Microsoft are going to be pushing more and more partners towards Office 365, and that's right across the UK and the world. Office 365 is one of their flagship products. They're not going to want customers, particularly small businesses, being on hosted Exchange, being on dedicated Exchange platforms. At this point with Microsoft, it's all about Office 365. So by moving to Office 365, the partners are going to be ahead of those market trends. But also as well, Microsoft have linking it to the point above, they're going to have other products that they want partners to engage in, like Azure. So again, it's really beneficial to move across at this point. The key thing is the next point, which is broadening the relationship with the customer. Going back to that point that it's no longer just about email. The needs, the IT needs and the productivity needs of customers are changing and broadening out, and it's always important that we have as much to talk about with our customers as possible. You want the customer to start viewing you as a one-stop shop for providing their services when they have a need to do with their files, when they have a need to instant message, when they have a need to put or to work a project in place, or they want to be able to collaborate with other partners of theirs. Did they come to you as opposed to talking to several different vendors with several different point solutions? So that's a couple of points there. As you can see, there are a lot there. The other one on that list that I'd point out is that I think is important at this time is retention too. Because Office 365 is in such demand, when you have the Office 365 conversation with your customer, you will probably discover that they have already not only looked into it, but they may have been approached by another vendor about Office 365. And you don't want to be in a position where, let's say that they're on hosted exchange or they're on a dedicated exchange and they're having conversations with your competitors, because there are some very aggressive competitors out there in the market at this point, and they're going to be trying to get into your clients, have the conversation about Office 365, and you don't want to miss that opportunity. So by moving to Office 365 now is arguably a retention action. So as you know, and that retention action opens up a world of opportunities in the future. So the hosted exchange platform really is what I would call a narrow opportunity. It's a point solution. It's just about email. And there are going to be some certain circumstances where you have niche requirements that's going to be applicable. Say, for example, if you had a customer that came along and they wanted a solely UK-based management in a solely UK-based data center, in a solely UK-based service, that is going to be a hosted exchange, because maybe elements of Office 365 may not equate to that. But if you have a look on the right-hand side, any time that a customer mentions any one of these things, it leads to Office 365. You know, they say that they want a more secure email service. They say that they want to be able to have a unified solution for their files. They say they want to be able to federate with instant messaging, or provide on-the-go conferencing, or link that conferencing into their email. They say that they want to be able to have enhanced security through data loss prevention, or through email encryption, or even if they want to have advanced requirements, such as I want to be able to move my current voice solution off-premise into the cloud. Again, that goes to Office 365. And it's important to state here that many signs for having the Office 365 conversation come from things outside of email. One of the ones that we see, for example, is that I want to move off my SPLA licensing for Office. So the 365 conversation might not even come out of the existing conversations that you're having about email with your customer at the given time. So we've seen that there is a lot of opportunity for Office 365. There's opportunities to have the conversation. There's opportunities to move to Office 365 at every point, to expand on their service, to give them a better service and a more complete solution. So when the next thing is that how are we going to move, and what things should we consider? And when considering migrations, it's best to really put this into three parts. You have the business side of things, so that's the commercial considerations. You have the technical considerations, and then you have the third box for some other considerations, that what we would call capacity and capability. That is, can I do it? So when looking at the business considerations, it's important to first of all consider the strategy of the client. Is how are they going to move? Why do they want to move? And if they have any preconceived notions of what a migration looks like. They may have undergone it before, they may have had a good experience, they might have had a bad experience. that you have to take that on board if you're going to design your migration and what you're going to offer to them. You should think about what they have to comply to. Do they have any regulations within their industry that means that they have to keep their service running whilst they migrate, if they have to have added solutions whilst they migrate? And so you have to consider, which is probably the main one, which is the Office 365 plan that they're moving to. And is it just going to be an Exchange Online plan? Is it going to be a business premium plan whereby you migrate and correct or upgrade their Office licensing at the same time? You have to consider the level of migration support that you give them. Are you going to provide them tools, or are you going to, say to them that this is something that you will have to do yourself? You'll have to consider the contracts that they're currently on, the resource that they currently have to do the job. I always think resource is really the key to a lot of migrations. If your customer has the resource, then that usually is a big indicator of the migration type that you proceed with. And also the delivery timescales. Can they only move next week? Do they envision moving over the period of a month, 3 months? Does their size dictate that it's going to take 6 months to do? All these things, when creating that business proposal to migrate, needs to be considered. Now, moving on to the technical, there are a lot of considerations here, and this is the one our partners tend to find the hardest thing. They say to us, what are all the things technically that we need to be aware of when doing the migration? So I've put some of them here today. There are some more that you can get, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But these are what we would call the main considerations from a technical perspective. The first is what source email system they're on. Are you moving from hosted Exchange or on-premise Exchange? Are you moving from Google, Lotus, GroupWise? Because there are different migrations when you're coming from different places. You have to consider the objects that you're going to migrate. Now, when we refer to migration objects, that's when we talk about things like mailboxes, distribution lists, contacts, permissions. They're the objects, the things, the actual things that you're moving over in that migration. You have, when doing migrations regularly, standard objects. So again, going back to mailboxes, contacts, distribution lists, you also have advanced objects. So those will be stuff like, if you've had experience of them, transport rules, custom policies on the platform, on the source platform. You have to consider geography, where the customer's users are located. Some might be located in a single office, others might have high degrees of roaming users and be very decentralized. Are they in one country? Are they in several? That all depends, on how you migrate. Bandwidth. When doing migrations, you migrate data. Again, are they at one premises whereby that bandwidth might be very limited, or are they going to be in several locations where some places it's easier to move than others? It's at this point, when doing these considerations, that we look at the migration type, the migration tools, and the migration management types. And in the next slides, we're going to break out each three of them, so that we can show you what is available. The other considerations from a technical perspective is the DNS records. Those are always part of migrations, and have you got access to them? Are they easily changeable? Can you add the records for Office 365? Do they need synchronization, directory synchronization to Office 365 through Azure AD Connect? Do they need an enterprise gateway through Mimecast or Message Labs or Symantec that they want to bolt on over the top of Office 365. And the final points to kind of major considerations are things like the hardware requirements. So this is the operating systems on devices that's going to be running Office 365, and the endpoints, so the mobile phones, the laptops, the tablets, are they all in line with being able to support Office 365 and make it run for optimal performance? So considering the business elements, considering the technical elements, the third and other, you'll see capacity and capability. So when approaching migrations, I think it's quite essential to perform some introspection and say, have we got the experience and the capacity to do this at a given time? Now, you may be in a position where you say, right, I've got somebody today that that can do it and manage several migrations on the go at one time. They've got the experience, they've got the background, they've got the credentials, and we can do this ourselves. On the other hand, you might feel like at this current time that you're not experienced enough, and that you may find it better to have Vusion manage that migration for you. But it's not really a black and white situation. It can be a little bit of both. So we have partners who like to manage smaller migrations to simpler migration types because they're very familiar with them. Alternatively, they like to offload the more complex ones to Vusion. These are the kind of the multi-site, multi-phased migrations, because it's just too much of an overhead on their time. We have some partners that just want to offload it completely because they say that their business is to focus on new business on the commercial side, and they would rather just offload the technical to what they can, to professionals who have been doing it day in, day out for years. So as partners of Vusion, you 100% have that choice, but it should form, along with business and along with technical, the core considerations when approaching any migration. So moving on now to the migration types, we identify that there are four main, and this is in line with Microsoft. So we have cutover, we have a remote MRS move, we have staged, and we have hybrid. Now, I'm not going to go into every aspect of this slide, as you can see that there's quite a lot of information on this slide, but what we've tried to do is we've tried to profile each one of the migration types, and I'll talk a little bit about each migration type, what its benefits are and what its limitations are. So if we talk about the cutover first, the cutover is like flicking a light switch. You would build the service on Office 365, you would change the DNS records, and then you would migrate the data. And after you have done that, you would then reconfigure the user's Outlook profiles and their mobile devices. And that cutover is designed and is aimed at small businesses because it's all in one go. So it's done with a short time frame, usually of a couple of days a week or a week, and you would book in with your customer and organize a date. So a date, for example, like Thursday night, you would build it, switch over on the Thursday night, migrate overnight, and then Friday you would do that reconfiguration work. So within the space of a very short period of time that they would be using the new system. And cutover is probably the most common form of migration today in cloud. It's widely known about, widely available. Most of our partners have probably engaged in this type more than any other. So it's often referred to as the foundation, the standard migration type. The next is remote MRS moves. Now, remote MRS moves, it sounds very technical, right? But what it actually is it's a cutover where you do not have to redo the user's Outlook profile. So that means is that you build the service, you cut out, the DNS is cut over, the migration data is moved, and instead of you having to go to users and reconfigure their Outlook profiles, the user gets a prompt in Outlook to say that the migration is done. And that saves a huge amount of time on resource. So that is a very attractive for doing a hands-off migration, but moving them all over in one go. So it's almost like a variant of the cutover that's a lot more highly automated and a lot more cleaner experience. The third, or the stage migration, is all about moving users over in batches. Now, as organizations get bigger, it becomes a lot harder to justify moving them all over in one go. So if I'm going to move a 20 user organization, they're more likely to work at one site, and you can reconfigure them all the next day and it will be straightforward. But if I've got a 200 user organization that's spread across 4 sites in the UK, and one of those sites are at Southampton and another one of those sites are in Glasgow, it's going to be impossible to be at those 2 locations at the same time to reconfigure them on the same day if you move them all over in one go. So doing a staged migration, you move them over in batches, and that means you can concentrate on those sets of users at any given time. And those batches might be dependent upon domain, they might be dependent upon groups, they might be dependent upon departments, they might be dependent upon some kind of custom attribute that you manage to identify with those users. And so whereas cutovers are designed for small, staged are designed for large organizations, and we've moved organizations that are 4,000-5,000 user organizations that are across multiple continents using this method. And as you can see, you can do staged migrations from not only Exchange, but you can do them from Gmail, you can do them from Lotus, from Zimbra, you can do them from as many platforms as the cutover. And the fourth is about hybrid, and hybrid migration is a migration that is specifically designed to move from Exchange on-premise servers. Microsoft designed this method that you could put Office 365 together with on-premise Exchange and pull the users across from one to another. And like the remote MRS method of moving, the users do not have to do any Outlook profile reconfiguration. But the thing about hybrid is that it's very limited in its scope. So you can only do it with Exchange on-premise. It's only really designed because there is a lot of scripting with PowerShell and back-end work for larger organizations, and it requires probably the most experience in migrations of all. So having a look at the migration types, now we look onto the migration tools. Migration tools are used to aid in the migration of data from one platform to another. Now, today you can still move that data manually. You would do that by PSTs or in local file formats. So you have the equivalent format for Macs and for Lotus. Lotus, for example, being NSF. So if you wanted to migrate the data manually, you can do. You still have that option, okay? And it's typically done in cutover scenarios. So as the administrator, you would set things up, you would change those DNS records, you would export all the data from Outlook, you would then redo the Outlook to Office 365, and then you would ingest that PST data. But that's a very, very time-intensive process. I mean, even for 10, 15 users, you're looking at a whole day in order to be able to do that data move, sometimes longer. So automated migration tools are very much the way to move the data today. And through Vusion, you have two types. You have BitTitan. If you've ever heard of MigrationWiz, you can purchase the licenses for that and use that with your migration, or you can use Microsoft's native tools that are inbuilt. And as you can see with BitTitan or with Microsoft, you can automate the move of the mail, the contacts, the calendars, the journals, the notes. It saves you a huge amount of time. Manual would probably be impossible to do over if you were approaching a 100-user organization. You would have, like, kind of almost certainly have to look at to make the project cost effective and to give the organization a good experience. So with BitTitan, that's predominantly used with both cutover and staged migrations, and the actual Microsoft tool itself can be used with any. So with the migration management, you have three routes. As a partner of Vusion, you can decide to self-manage this yourself. You can do all of the requirements mapping. You can source, choose, and operate all the migration tools. You can choose the migration method. You can do all the provisioning. If you are happy and confident in doing that, then that's great. You can start those moves to Office 365 today. You can engage with Vusion for part managed moves. So a part managed move could be that you want us to be able to do the requirements section, or you want us to operate the migration tool, or you want us to do the provisioning of the 365 organization, whereas you do elements of it, and we can work together in order to do that migration. Whereas a fully managed migration is this, that you can offload the whole lot to us. By offloading the whole lot to us, you can concentrate on important things such as the business relationship, with the being there on a day-to-day, with helping them identify the next services and doing more business with them. Whereas you can free up days of your time, because we will do the discovery, the statement of work, we will project manage it, we will provision it, we will do the data migration, the endpoint reconfiguration. It's almost like a black box. You provide, you provide the migration to us, and it's our intention that the next action with you, that they will be there happy choosing the next service. Now, when considering the migration management, if we cycle back and to the part where we were discussing capability and capacity, those are going to play a big part in determining how you manage that migration. But we would also say that there are some scenarios as well where they're more likely to be fully managed by us. So one of them would be migrations that involve directory synchronization. Directory synchronization, you have to spin up a member server, you have to install Azure AD Connect, you have to put in Exchange to be able to manage AD. Some of that becomes, just too much for partners, or too advanced technically in order to be able to do that. And so we would recommend, or we're seeing that if directory synchronization is involved with 365, then partners tend to more likely to come back to us for a fully managed migration. Splits and mergers from one Office 365 environment to another, because you have to transplant the domains. You have to have a kind of integral knowledge about how Office 365 environments work. The expectations in terms of outages, again, they tend to be ones that they've gone down a fully managed route. Large consolidations, if you have organizations that are over 1,000 users, okay, that are multi-site, multi-country, they tend to have lots of applications locked into their existing service. Again, it might require coming to Vusion in order to, at least part manage or fully support you with that. And there are a couple of other scenarios there. So having looked at the migration types, having looked at the migration management, having looked at the migration tools, we now move to the point of during the migration, it kind of links into the opportunities of what more can be done by partners, or what more opportunities partners have during this phase. And we were discussing additional professional or managed services. Now, this slide, it is quite busy. There's a lot of content on here, but I think really that is the point. If you have a look at the sheer amount that you can add during this, a lot of times our partners say to us, well, we don't know if migrations are that profitable things to do. Fusion's professional services started off in doing migrations, and they became very profitable engagement, because they really are transitions a time to do the review of your services, to do what more can we add, what more can we package as a professional service to our customers who are looking to have the best experience. So in terms of additional services are additional services to layer on to Office 365, and an example there would be Exclaimer Cloud. I'll pick one right out there. Now, Exclaimer Cloud is an application that creates professional signatures, templated signatures. When you get emails through, and you see down the bottom of their email that they have all their contact details, they have their linked to their Twitter and their Facebook, and they have their disclaimer at the bottom, and they have some other images in there, and it gives it a great overall professional feel. Office 365 can't do that as well as Exclaimer, because whilst you can do HTML disclaimers in Office 365, you have to know how to work with CSS, and most of us don't want to get into that. We want to be able to easily apply templates to groups, to domains. Exclaimer Cloud can be easily bolted on when moving over to Office 365 as something that the customer didn't previously have, but was something that they would like to have in their business. And you could say the same about any in them list. With DocuSign, you're adding the ability to sign their documents that improves their business processes, which is again something that they didn't have previously. And Microsoft themselves provide several add-ons to Office 365. So if you can see all the ones that are named Microsoft there, and Microsoft Intune, for example, is about controlling mobile devices and endpoints. It's about mobile device management and mobile application management, which I think is today is pretty essential in a post-GDPR world. So moving over to Office 365, you should be saying, what more can I add on to this when I'm having those conversations? Professional services, on the other hand, are things that occur during the migration that tends to be involved in setup activities or project management activities that you can commoditize and offer to your customers in order. Now, professional services tend to be one-off costed items, and as you can see, there's a huge amount here. These are just things, or some of the things that Fusion do, that can be layered on to Office 365. You're moving a customer to Office 365. Do they need education? Do they need a readiness assessment? Do they need to go in and do a discovery about all of the versions of Office that they're currently using? If they're buying other services, then there's going to take time to and cost to integrate those services. So in the actual engagement of moving them from one platform to another, you haven't just got the recurring cost going forward of Office 365 and those additional services. You've got the one-off cost of getting them into the state that they actually require, educating and preparing their users to best use the service, and to also making sure that that whole process is streamlined. And there's no definition of what makes a professional service. As a partner, you can probably identify and may already be thinking about things that you can make into professional services to layer on. And the third is managed services, and managed services are ongoing management of Office 365 and the additional services. So professional services being those one-off, managed services are for recurring revenue. Now Microsoft are very big on this at the moment. If you see things about Office 365 and Microsoft 365 and Azure, they talk about managed services in the same instance. That is about getting recurring revenue for providing additional service layers on top of the service. Now that can mean things like monitoring. You know, Office 365 can be connected to through the Graph API, or through Power BI packs, or through Azure reports that you can sit down and review on a monthly basis. A very simple report is how many of my users have logged into Office 365 this month. And the customer doesn't know where to get that, they don't know what it means, and they don't know what they have to do. But providing, that report to them on a monthly basis or a bi-monthly basis, sitting down and working out how they're using it, how best to use it, are they using all of the applications in Office 365, because they could just be using email and Office, they might not be using SharePoint or Teams, can give them a more optimal experience. On the other hand, another example of a managed service would be provisioning. There might only be one administrator in a 200 user company. He has to design the IT strategy. He has to be involved in procurement. He may not have time to sit down every day and add a mailbox. On the other hand, he doesn't want to have to incur another salary, or might not be permitted to by his board in order to be able to do so. As a partner, you're best placed to offer this. I've met several partners who are currently doing this, and they do it in a really cost-effective way, and they do it and give their customers, again, the optimal experience. So when we think about moving to Office 365, I would advise in trying to get away from thinking that it's just a license going forward and that it will be a self-managed bare bones service, because there's a lot of potential here to make it a lot more than it currently is. So I just want to recap at this point in terms of what we have gone over and what we've covered today. So we wanted to understand why moving to Office 365 is an opportunity. We identified several reasons for that. Office 365 is booming. Fusion partners, are saying that it's improving their business moving to them today. It's an opportunity to retain clients. It's an opportunity to have better conversations. There are several, reasons. And it's also an opportunity from a standpoint in that rather than just going and talking about mail, there are so many inroads to 365 and so many more business requirements you can meet. We wanted to understand what we need to consider when migrating customers, so that we now understand that, there's a set of business, considerations. There are a set of technical considerations, and there's also considerations in terms of capability and whether we want to do migrations or to offload them onto a partner like Fusion in order to provide a seamless transition. we wanted to understand what migration types, tools and management options we have. So we went through the migration types, we discussed cutover, the remote MRS move, the staged and the hybrid. And each of them have a profile and each of them are designed towards a different type of organisation. We looked at the tools and whilst you can still move data manually, you have the option now of doing it automated via BitTitan or through the Microsoft migration tool. We looked at the management options, so you can proceed with these migrations in a self-managed way, or you can leverage Fusion if you wanted to explore part or full managed migrations. And we also wanted to understand additional professional and managed service opportunities that we have. And there are that slide, that very busy slide of all of the options we have. In fact, sometimes, I think that there could be too many. I mean, and because that isn't just the list in itself. When looking at that, there's a huge amount of options to have in order to bolster the profitability and meet the customer's needs. So moving forward, I would say have 4 recommendations. The first is to download the migrations white paper at fusion.cloud. The migrations white paper covers everything in this slide and probably in a little bit more detail because we've only had an hour today. You can take that away, review it and in your own time with your own teams, and you can start putting something together there. The second recommendation is to contact your account manager to discuss migrations today. I mean, if you hopefully you have a better understanding about migrations kind of coming out of this, and we'd be happy to discuss this with you in more detail. Any questions you have or you can think of, please just reach out to us. So I mean, we want to have that conversation today with you. The third recommendation would be to attend the rest of the sessions in the series. This isn't just a single webinar. What we're going to do is we're going to deep dive into all of those migration types. We want to understand more about what the cutover is, what the MRS move is, what the staged migration is, what it looks like, how we do it. And that's going to be increasingly important if you haven't experienced that migration type, because we're going to go into the detail on these and really break them open. And the last thing would be to get migrating and seize the opportunity. I think it's important to look at this from the perspective in that every day that they're not on Office 365 is one lost. It's one less day to talk about these things with your customers. There's one less day to add more. There is, it's another day of them potentially having these conversations with another competitor. It's important to make you as essential as you are to their life. So now the Q&A session.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Chris. An amazingly detailed look into migrations there and what the potential opportunity is there. So yeah, now we open the floor to Q&A. So if anyone does have any questions, and please pop them into the conversations tab on the Skype for Business meeting, and we'll be able to cover them either now or after the webinar as well.
Okay, so I see a question here. In terms of we have one that basically asks us that if you have let's say a 75 user migration, which kind of type of migration would you say that that could be a cutover or a staged migration? The answer to that would be that there is no hard and fast rule in terms of the size of an organization against the migration type. So you can do a staged migration for 10 users, you can do a cutover migration for 200 users if you really wanted to do it that way. However, we obviously have seen these day after day for the past 10 years, and we make recommendations on the sizes, of the actual migrations. So I'd never really advise a cutover on a 200 user. I would never really recommend, a stage migration on a 5 user organization. But in that kind of range, which is 75, if they're all at one site, if you have several people in your organization that can be there on the day to redo their Outlook devices and their phones, then yes, it may be achievable. But if it was purely based on the number, I would probably say that that's looking more like a staged migration, because a 75 user tends to have a few sites here and there, roaming users, where you need to move them on in batches.
Perfect. Thanks, Chris. That seems to be all the Q&A questions we've got. So again, thank you everybody for joining us today. We hope to see you all on the next webinar in the series, which is going to be on Tuesday, the 10th of July. And that's going to be looking into much more detail on the cutover migration and when that would be the best time to use that migration method. So again, thank you everyone for joining, and we'll see you then.